She is one of the directors of ESPN's Films' latest documentaries, 144, that takes viewers inside the WNBA's unprecedented 2020 season. The documentary airs May 13th on ESPN. We welcome Jenna Contreras onto Hoopsology. How's it going, Jenna?
Hey guys, I'm great. How's it going with you guys?
We're doing pretty well. Thanks for joining the show. And once I heard about this documentary, I saw it on Twitter, and immediately I was like, I got to find who's making this documentary. So that's when I found you on Twitter, and you were very gracious to join the show. So I want to ask you, what was the motivation in putting together this documentary?
Yeah, so with Shania Gumake being one of the executive producers on this, she had the great idea of essentially marrying her two companies of the WNBA and ESPN. And so, we're all in this pandemic. There's talks about, sports coming back, talks about the WNBA being in a bubble. So she pitched the idea to ESPN Films, said, hey guys, what do you think about doing this all access, unprecedented time in the world in the WNBA bubble for the 2020 season? Is this something you guys are interested in? Can we make this happen? And so, ESPN Films jumped at the chance. They then reached out to my current group that I'm in, which is part of the ESPN Features Unit. And myself and Lauren Stoll were assigned the project. And about 3 weeks later, I was in Bradenton, Florida. And so we moved very quickly. The season had already started, but I had to do quarantine outside at home before I went to Florida, and then quarantine in Florida as well. But we had to adjust in the way of how we would shoot a documentary. Usually when you get the assignment of cover an entire league of 144 women, you would have more than one camera. But because of COVID restrictions and because of everything that was going on, we had to have a very tiny footprint. And so that footprint was just myself, one camera, and one audio tech. To cover a full league. So, being in partnership with Shanae was instrumental in us being able to really hit the ground running and start filming and creating these relationships with the players because she essentially had vouched for us. She said, Jenna is going to be the director or producer of this. She's coming in the bubble. She's cool. Talk to her. Let's do it. And so, that just really expedited the entire time of our relationships when we got into the bubble.
How was it like for you in the bubble? We had a journalist that was in the NBA bubble, and I think he had mixed emotions in terms of it was exciting seeing all the games. You can't see all the playoff games. It's impossible to travel. But in this bubble, you're able to see, all these athletes in a row. So what was it like for you to seeing, all these great WNBA athletes all at once as compared to your regular season? You would have to travel to city to city. What was that like for you to see them up close like that?
It's really kind of special, right? Because there's a few amount of people that got to watch the games the way that I was able to observe and cover. So it was kind of surreal at times. Like when we were in this bubble, there is no separation of work and home. You are working where you are living. You are living where you are working, and there's no separation. So that was, sometimes challenging because we wanted to make sure that the players had a quote unquote off time where they can kind of let their hair down and not worry about being filmed or what have you. And, it was also hard for the crew and us, like we were in it together we left our families, we left everything that was going on, and we're kind of sequestered into this bubble too. And I think one thing that, across the board, people didn't really consider as being a huge factor was the mental health toll that was going on. Everyone was just so excited for sports. I was excited for sports. And then I get there and it's like, holy crap, like you really do take for granted being able to jump in your car and buy a smoothie or go to Target or pick out your own produce, just like the little things of everyday life. And so, it was interesting to be able to have this experience with these women. I've talked to a bunch of them still after the bubble, and, we just kind of laugh of like, you can't really explain what the bubble is and really clearly make anyone understand unless you've lived it. And so it's kind of this, this unspoken bond that we all have for going through this time together.
Jenna, what was the day-to-day like in the WNBA bubble? Was it daily testing before going to your activities and your coverage? And can you just kind of describe the day-to-day for us?
Yeah, so every single day, we would have to get a COVID test, just like everyone that was in the bubble, every player of the league, team officials, WNBA staff. So our day started off with a COVID test. And then usually there would be, you know, a production meeting of me and my DP. We would have breakfast and kind of just go over the day of, you know, what the schedules of players were doing, who had games, who was off, you know, because everyone was playing every other day and off days weren't really a thing. But, you know, we're trying to find that balance of, okay, if the Sparks are having an off day today, is there a team bonding event that they're doing? If we go cover the Phoenix Mercury game, are we going to miss out on somebody's rehab that's going on? So we really, you know, had to be very conscious of the choices that we made with filming to make sure that we were giving the viewer the full scope of what the bubble was. You know, it wasn't just basketball, it was working with social injustice, it was motherhood in and outside of the bubble with your children, it was rehab for some, and then it was also just, you know, COVID and just being able to like relax and things. So no day was ever the same. You know, we tried as best as we could map out what we would do, but you know, being a documentary crew, you need to be nimble. So we would adjust, and sometimes, like, you know, we were all on this campus at IMG Academy, and we had a golf cart to get around, and sometimes we just ride around the golf cart, and you're like, oh, the Chicago Sky are doing a pool workout, cool, let's film that. Or, oh, the Indiana Fever are doing a paint night, let's go see what that's going on. And so yeah, we would try to best, you know, plan our day. It was definitely planned in pencil just to be able to react to whatever was going to be going on.
Jenna, I wanted to ask you, what do you want viewers to take away when watching the documentary?
Yeah, you know, I think the biggest thing is, you know, this is a film of resiliency, right? Like these women are so strong in their convictions and so powerful and so intelligent and are just pure role models, and just of not just for young women, but for men, women, boys, girls. There's so much that you could take away from these women, and they're just kind of the essence of what it means to be like a fully rounded, good human being. And, you know, I just hope that people take away a respect that these women deserve. You know, like you can watch this film and you don't have to be a WNBA player prior to watch it. If you watch it, you're for sure going to be a WNBA player fan afterwards, you know, but there's just so much more to these women, and the vulnerability and the grace that they showed with us, you know, I hope it jumps off the screen and that people can relate to these women, and also, you know, maybe in some of the scenes that we have, they can learn something.
Do you see the Wubble, as it was called? Do you see this being kind of a turning point for the league? I just noticed a lot more traction with this upcoming season in terms of just the jersey reveals, the schedule reveal, just
great, right?
Things. Yeah, exactly. It's awesome, and it seems like it started from the bubble. Do you see this as kind of like a taking off standpoint for a new era of the WNBA? Obviously, the circumstances weren't the best, but could this be kind of a blessing in disguise in a way to really the bubble was a jumping off point for new fans, and now they're jumping into the real WNBA season coming up?
Right. I think what we've learned is if you put it on TV, people are going to watch it, and you just need to make it accessible for people. You know, with lack of sports during a time, the WNBA was able to kind of capitalize on that and have more games viewed than ever before on ESPN and other broadcast partners. And so when we saw that the ratings were up 68% across all TV platforms, that's a substantial amount, a number, when, you know, a lot of sports programming numbers were down. So I think they have capitalized on it, and they've just kind of been riding this wave. And I think also, you know, if you even see like the college women, and they're speaking out about the unright circumstances of what they were having in the NCAA championship bubbles, I think, you know, these women are not afraid to speak out and to call attention to when things aren't right. And that's, you know, the WNBA has always done this. Now there's this kind of younger generation that's following suit. And I think people are listening. You know, like social media is powerful. People want to watch the sports, and, you know, large media outlets are giving them the TV time. So I think it is growing, and it is kind of this blessing in disguise. You know, like as hard as 2020 was, there was still some great things that happened. And if the growth of the league can come out of that, then it's an amazing thing.
Oh, go ahead, Matt.
Jenna, I was just going to ask you, you kind of alluded to this earlier, but two things. Does the documentary kind of take a look at all the teams of the WNBA with, you know, it seems like it would be kind of tough focus on each and every team. And I think another thing to your point, you mentioned getting more exposure, of course, gives the opportunity for more ratings, which thankfully is what happened. Do you see this documentary like creating, I don't want you to give anything away, but potentially like creating some new stars and putting a spotlight on some players that maybe more casual fans haven't seen much of before?
Absolutely. Yes. We had the wonderful opportunity to really meet and connect with these women. I mean, I did over 60 interviews in the bubble, and,
Wow.
that's not all the women got to make it, but, there were players that are going to highlight it in the film that, necessarily aren't those household names, but, their personalities are just fantastic and they're just amazing people. So, this is kind of a viewpoint for people that maybe haven't heard of, the Ariel Atkins of the world, or, someone else that is kind of finally getting the chance to shine a little bit. We tried our best to really feature every team. Obviously the Aces and Storm, spoiler alert, are going to be featured more. They made it all the way to the end. And so we really tried to focus on everyone. And, we made sure every team is represented in some way of it, but that was a difficult task to do.
Jenna, what was it like in the Wubble when kind of the height of the social justice movement took place, and when you saw the players take a stand? You kind of walk us through, without kind of spoiling a documentary, I guess, how much of that is in your documentary in terms of the WNBA players being on the forefront of social justice? Because I still don't think they get the credit as they deserve in terms of the other leagues following suit. It really was the WNBA for years before any other sports league. So when you were in the WNBA bubble, when everything was taking place, what was going through your mind? Was the main topic of when you entered the bubble, did that change because of what was happening with the WNBA players taking a stand for social justice?
When we first entered the bubble, we knew that there was going to be kind of 5 pillars that we were going to cover, right? What is a bubble? A season of basketball in a bubble. COVID, with the whole world burning around us and what's going on. Social injustice, like you said, the women have always been at the forefront before it was trendy to do. Motherhood, because this is a league where there are mothers, and how is parenting with your child in the bubble and the parenting when your child is outside the bubble. And mental health, how are people adjusting in this when literally, this isn't what they signed up to do. They didn't sign up to play basketball in a single site and not be able to see their loved ones or have the treatment or the doctors or anyone else that would be around them to really, keep their bodies in shape. So those were the 5 things that we really wanted to have through the documentary and really show. So day 12 was when Jacob Blake shooting reaction happened. So we were very early. We shot for 52 days. So this was very early in our filming process. And, it was a turning point. It started off like any other day. We had just finished an interview with Lasia Clarendon, and then we walked downstairs and there's breaking news. The Milwaukee Bucks are not playing. And then, we knew something was going to happen. We didn't know what, but there was no way that the women of the W were just going to stand by or play and not make a statement. So we had to really just be nimble and be ready to react to what was going on. And what you'll see in the documentary is that moment really just kind of reinforced why they were there in the first place. They dedicated their season to Say Her Name and Breonna Taylor and to just social injustice efforts. And so when that moment came, it was hard. It was tough. It was emotionally draining. It was, there are very raw and honest conversations from the moment that you'll see in the documentary that I think makes the WNBA just, again, unlike any other, because they really, good, bad, or indifferent, they're going to listen to what everyone says and everyone's thoughts about that. And, that was a hard time for everyone to decide what to do next, even discussing if they were going to play that night. That was a league decision. That wasn't just a one team decision. So, that it's featured in the documentary, and it's, some things that I think, are very historical that will never happen again. And it just, it kind of reinforced and reset the tone of why they were playing in the first place. And then that was certainly the turning point for the documentary, and then our structure of the storytelling.
Jenna, I also want to ask you to that point of the WNBA and them taking a stand. We saw with the NBA, they had that famous meeting where all the players met, and there was a lot of arguing. There was a lot of conflict in terms of how to proceed with this season. The WNBA seems pretty unified. Was that the case in your, I guess, documenting everything that was going on? Or did you see kind of conflicting opinions in terms of certain news events would come up and maybe some players would have maybe a different approach in terms of, the league addressing the situation? Was it pretty much everybody was on the same page, or were there, I guess, contrarian voices with the players that you observed?
Yeah, you got to watch.
Okay. Gotcha. Will do. Teaser. Gotcha. Then I want to ask you, with this point, was there anything that you experienced in the bubble that caught you by surprise that you wouldn't think that would have occurred, or anything not particularly shocking, but something that you're like, I didn't think this would, happen, be taken a part of this bubble?
Well, I guess just the first of I had if you would have told me that I was going to spend 62 days in a bubble with an entire league, I would have told you that you were crazy and that would never happen. So I just think the fact that I even was there was, just such a crazy thing. And I think the one thing that caught me off guard, I would say, was not being in the bubble, but leaving the bubble. Because we had been there for so long, we had kind of a schedule, COVID was still a thing, but it really wasn't a thing because we were safe. We were in this bubble where everyone was getting tested every single day. We all had on masks. You kind of become, it's this small community where you're just walking around and you're waving to everyone if you know them or not. And everyone waves back to you because, hey, there's only a certain amount of people in this whole entire bubble and you're going to run into each other all the time. So it kind of became this community. And then it was almost scary to leave the bubble in a way because our sense of schedule and sense of purpose that we'd had for 62 days was gone. We had a job to go and cover the WNBA season and document it. And, we knew every morning we would have a COVID test. We knew when we would have lunch and dinner and we'd have some games or practices or, some lifestyle filming. And then we woke up and that was no longer a thing anymore. So it was weird having to adjust going back to normalcy or back to civilization out into the wild again after, we were kind of sequestered and safe. The news and everything was happening around you in the world, but you weren't so inundated by it, right? Because in 2020, everyone's home, everyone's just reading news feeds and have the news on 24/7. We didn't have the time to do that. So it was almost like a nice break from reality. And then leaving it was like, oh crap, we are going back to reality. And what are we going back to?
And does your documentary address the long-term consequences of the WNBA bubble, both positive and negative, in terms of not only the player psyche, but also perhaps that, obviously you don't want the players to spend that much time away from their families, but however, a bubble-like atmosphere where fans can go once the pandemic is over, was that even something that the players might be interested in the future, just considering the interest of just viewers at home, just wanting to watch the bubble? Is this something that could be possible in the future, or is this like a no-go? It's impossible unless there's another pandemic. We'll never see a WNBA bubble again.
Oh, I asked a very similar question to people when they were leaving, and some were like, nah, I kind of like it. It's kind of like Olympic Village. It's kind of like college. Maybe the younger players were a little bit more amenable to those circumstances, but, some of the veterans are like, no, I'm not doing this ever again. I get it, it's a lot to ask when you didn't sign up for that. So I don't think that there would be another WNBA season in a bubble without a pandemic. And I also hope that there isn't another one, because that means that we're in another pandemic. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, agreed. Well, Jenna, thank you very much for coming on the show. Please let our listeners and viewers know where they can find you on social media, when the documentary airs, and anything else you're working on in 2021 as well.
Yeah, so on Twitter, you can find me at Jenna C. Contreras. On Instagram, I am Jenna C23. The documentary 144 will air this Thursday, May 13th at 9 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. We also have an original song that was written by Disney singer and songwriter Blush. That it's titled "Enough Is Enough." That is very strong, and she, watched the film and used that as her muse, and she captured it beautifully. So there will be a music video to go along with the film that will be dropping later next week. And this has been my baby in my life for the last 10 months. So the next thing I'm working on is a little bit of vacation.
Cool.
But after that, I'm looking forward to getting the opportunity to tell more women athlete stories.
Well, Jenna, thank you very much for coming on to the show. I speak for Matt that we're really looking forward to the documentary. This is, I think, a must see for just not even, I think, sports fans, just for it's people walking the planet, just to really observe what happened when these extraordinary women, not only was just playing a game, but also was using their voice as well for a great cause. So this is a must see, and really looking forward to seeing it. Thank you, Jenna, very much.
Yeah. Thanks so much, guys. Appreciate it.